Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Digital Dialogue presented by the Institute for Digital Transformation. My name is Pooja Arora. I'm a public relations and a strategic communications professional, and I worked in varied sectors. Besides this, I'm also an educator and a researcher. Today's topic focuses on how leaders and organizations across the globe create a balance between their business goals and the societal needs through sustainability efforts. Sustainability happens when a company operates while minimizing negative environmental and social impacts. To discuss this topic, I have an excellent panel that comprises leaders from academia, not for profit, and corporate. These speakers are from three different uh, countries: Germany, India, Canada. And without further ado, I would like to start with the first speaker, Megan Thudium from Content for Good and Co. Megan, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the introduction. My name is Megan, and I'm actually an American based in Berlin, Germany, so I'm not a German. And I am a marketing strategist. I'm a sustainable marketer, and I am the managing director of Content for Good and Co., which is a content marketing consultancy for brands that are doing better for people on the planet.
Amazing. Next, we have Santhosh Jayaram from Amrita School for Sustainable Futures. Welcome, Santhosh.
Hi, hello everyone, and thanks Pooja for inviting me for this. Uh, yeah, as an introduction, I am currently an adjunct professor of practice at the Amrita School of Sustainable Futures, and I have worked in the space of sustainability for almost 3 decades before I switched to the academics and research, and those 3 decades. Have seen me working on various things, working across 20 countries, setting standards, setting regulations. Have been part of the Securities and Exchange Board of India's advisory committees on the standards related to sustainability. And in my previous role as a partner of KPMG, I have led one of the biggest consulting teams in this part of the world. And some of the work which we have done at that point of time have become case studies with leading academic institutes like Harvard and INSEAD as well. So looking forward to share my thoughts today, and thank you.
Wow, that's amazing. So, the third speaker is Pamela Sleightholm, former board director of Blooming Boulevards. Welcome, Pamela.
Thank you very much for having me, Pooja. So I'm Pamela. I'm based in Toronto, Canada. I got into communications after completing a degree in biological science and then going to journalism school. For nearly 15 years, I've worked primarily with not-for-profits, focused on the environment, health, girls' rights and girls' education, and social services. I've also worked alongside municipal leaders in city government. A few years ago, I made the decision to focus more on my environmental work. So I'm just 1 month away from completing a second degree in environmental management, sustainability, and geographical information science from the University of Toronto. I've researched sustainable urban agriculture and horticulture and the use of GIS applications in urban forestry. I'm really excited about the combination of digital communications and big data analysis to create personal, engaging, and data-focused sustainability materials. And I've just started my own business, 𝗗𝗂𝗁𝗂𝗁, which focuses on maps and data storytelling for environmental communications.
Wow, that's amazing. That's so apt for the times that we're living in. Okay, going to our fourth panelist. Last but not the least, we have Pallavi Khare from Climate Asia.
Hi, thank you for having me, Pooja. I'm Pallavi. I am the Chief of Staff at Climate Asia, working at the intersection of gender equity and climate change. Have about 12 years of work experience across various like public health and have done management consulting. Did my undergrad from IIT Delhi and then master's in public policy from Harvard Kennedy School. Excited to be here.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, everyone, for being here. And I would encourage all the attendees who've just joined us to ask questions and share your comments as we go along. And on all the speakers here, please feel free to interject during the conversation. So I'm going to start. So until last year, I was working with an organization that has been deeply committed towards environment, CSR, and governance practices. And not just that, businesses in general have been quite vocal about their work on global platforms. Like World Economic Forum or COP, that have actually provided them with enhanced visibility and have helped them talk about what they're doing in their respective areas. Now, the last COP29 was different, and some of the key leaders across the globe were missing. So that brings me to my first question, that what is it that deters or sparks a leader to invest in sustainability efforts? Are there leaders, or specific industries that are leading the way in sustainability in comparison to others? So that's my first question. And who would like to go first? Pallavi, would you want to go first?
Happy to go. Sure. So I thought about this, and I think like we have to also sort of be cognizant of the times we live in right now. It's the age of bite-sized infographics. Like people are not reading long-form content. There is short attention span. So how are we getting the information? How are we consuming it? The tech companies sort of have become really powerful in terms of shaping the narrative, right? And then in that sense, who are the leaders at that level? And then who are our leaders in the government? What narrative are they shaping? And then, like, I was thinking about leadership and then authority figures, and how like this question of what deters them from sustainability, like sparks or deters. So in terms of determent, like we tend to follow, in times of crisis, we tend to follow something that sort of can give us comfort, some sort of an authority figure. And we're seeing the rise of a lot of authority figures, and people like sort of are following them. If I may sort of talk about the controversial Milgram experiment, in which some volunteers were asked to give like an electric shock to some actors. They were told they were volunteers, and like there was an authority figure present there who was shouting that you need to increase the voltage, and they could like sense that the other person, the other volunteer, is feeling the pain, but they went ahead nevertheless because there was an authority figure present. So I'm saying this because we may know that something is not right, or something in our conscious we may know that, but we tend to follow what the leaders are saying, what the leaders are doing, and the narrative gets shaped accordingly, right? So what deters some leaders in talking about sustainability is some of the other leaders who are shaping the narrative. So I guess like yeah, like I would just stop at that, saying that there is a responsibility of people who are powerful and who are in very high positions to shape the right narrative. And unfortunately, like we are seeing what's happening in the last couple of weeks, also like we see the narrative is sort of going in a different direction.
Correct. So leaders following leaders, changing the narrative, creating their narrative. Yeah, absolutely. Pamela, what do you have to say about that?
So I think, from the perspective of the not for profit and municipal leaders, it's some of the things that they are being sparked to kind of get involved in more of the sustainability education really starts with this idea of risk mitigation. That right now, we are at a point where no matter where you are in the world, you're starting to see the impacts of climate change. And it may start as a cost savings measure. Right now in Canada, we have a carbon tax on our fuel. So, businesses and nonprofits are going to be looking more at reducing their fuel usage just to reduce their costs. But looking into the future, it's a risk mitigation thing as well, because we know that there's going to be more regulations and laws changing in the future in relation to our resource use and other sustainability measures. And so it's just good planning to start having these conversations about sustainability and what can be done now, looking into the future in order to protect the business.
Yes, absolutely. Megan, what do you think?
Yeah, some great insights here. So I've been thinking about this topic a lot because, yeah, we do live in pretty stressful times at the moment, and a lot of things are changing in the sustainability space, especially here in the European Union, and also me as an American, touching on a bunch of different topics. But I've been thinking about this question because even though we do live in precarious times and it's definitely complex, the whole game of sustainability continues to be complex in general. There's lots of different facets around it, and it's historically the way that it's been communicated has overcomplicated a lot of things, and people are they feel disengaged from the topic. So I feel like right now, with everything that is going on, it's a great opportunity for us to look at it in a positive light, where how can we reconnect the sustainable communication, the sustainability narrative to the things that people care the most about. The things that people are caring the most about right now is, for example, the food on their table and the rising prices. How is that going to relate to climate change? How is that going to shape our future? We're worried about the competitiveness of markets and international markets and supply chains and these type of topics. How are we going to connect that to sustainability? So I think even though the narrative is changing in the sense that a new thing is basically impacting us at the moment from a geopolitical perspective, a lot of the themes are the same. So how can we keep the narratives? How can we keep the focus as sustainability leaders on the things that matter most to people, on the things that matter most to business leaders, to citizens, to people in communities? And how do we keep those connected together? Um, and how do we connect people to those topics and help them look past to the negativity and the doomism and everything that's happening now towards the image that we should all be building together, which is to build a better future?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Santhosh, what do you think? Can you give us some examples?
So I wouldn't name anyone in this discussions, but yes, I agree with the points already made by the speakers. And so one of the thing is that every sector will have their leaders and the laggards, right? I mean, you cannot compare one sector to the other sector because the sustainability context itself is different between a mining company and a banking sector. Both can be qualified as extractable resources, but yeah, still they are different, right? But the and I like what Pallavi said, because at the end of the day, it boils down to the kind of leaders who are there in terms of steering this. And so when you look at the business leaders, I don't think there is a lack of awareness. Maybe some of them may lack empathy. But even leaders with empathy and awareness lack actions, right? So there are some things which drives people, and of course there are some bottlenecks and all those things. If I have to kind of look at what really pushes these leaders, sometimes what happens is that I've seen this a Indian business leader going to Davos as early as 2008, and I was consulting that organization, and suddenly in Davos he declares that in another 10 years they will be carbon neutral. I mean, it was never discussed or we didn't finalize anything. And when he came back, we kind of asked him, what made you say so? He said everybody was speaking and nobody was committing. So sometimes what happens is that the lack of progress and lack of commitment really pushes them to go that extra distance. Of course, it can be a business differentiator and opportunity and all those things. And then there are business leaders who hit that epiphany moment, right? I mean, and then they suddenly realize. So these can be some of those areas where the leaders really pick things up. But of course, there are many challenges which deter the leaders, although they know the importance, they feel for it, but still it deters because of many institutional structures. For example, quarterly returns. I mean, quarter to quarter, you are pushing these leaders to produce a growth, and naturally that puts a pressure in terms of short term and long term. So that can be one. And of course, things like suddenly this whole upswing of what we call as ESG, right? There is no clear definition of ESG. What is ESG? It is environment, social, and governance. Now, that's not a definition, right? And that's the reason why you have on one extreme people calling for it, on the other extreme people beating on it. So you definitely feel that which side is right. Both have kind of arguments, and as a leader, you are in between somewhere. And then add to that uncertainties in technologies. We do not know as to, although many people have committed to go to net zero, we really do not know exactly what technologies would lead us there. Or for example, even hydrogen, we haven't cracked the code yet, right? And add to that the more complications, and I think Europe just rolled back on their regulations. Everybody was getting ready to kind of go into a regulation, and suddenly you see a rolling back of those regulations. Now, all these kind of things, really is not in favor of somebody who want to action on something, right?
Yes.
So I would stop there.
No, absolutely. I think you made actually very important points that, of course, there are leaders who follow leaders, but then their commitment is also important, right, as we go along. So that brings me to another thought that I had. So I met this tech startup founder a couple of months back in Canada, and I was talking to him about the need to invest in sustainability efforts. But he said that for us, it is only profit that matters. And in sustainability efforts, there are no return on investments. So I would like to ask all of you that how do you, if you get an opportunity to speak with young leaders or business leaders of tomorrow, how would you encourage them to invest in sustainability efforts? How can organizations truly measure the impact of sustainability efforts? So Santhosh, can we start with you first? Would you like to go first this time?
Sure, I can try. I mean, so one of the things is there has been a lot of talk around the opportunity wave, and my earlier life as consultant, we have beaten around that bush quite a bit because people listen to opportunities very easily. When you suddenly see that there is a big opportunity here, and that's a great attraction. So that's one of the dimensions. But I think the challenge is that we have gone through that route quite a bit. And what really happens is that there is a bit of a challenge when you go that route, is that once the opportunity is dry up, the interest goes down. And so the challenge is that how do you kind of communicate a kind of a balanced approach to this? Now, for that, I would say is the important is, again, I would call upon some real changes in terms of structures and all those things. Because today what we are doing is that there is no valuation around what we call as the natural capital, social capital, and some of those things. And if you really bring those things into the economics, sustainability looks different, right? So I think that's something which is very important, and especially there are various strides which the academic world is currently doing. NY Stern does what is called as a return on sustainable investment, and there are a number of such kind of models which kind of bring in those kind of valuation theories to look at it. The important part is in terms of if you integrate those kind of valuation theories, those investments will definitely look much more economical. And then, of course, the way in which we look at has to change, right? I mean, It was after the World War II in the 1950s in the US, they decided to have GDP as a measure for whatever they want to measure. But finally, if you produce more, if you consume more, and if you waste more, GDP will increase, right? So till that time, when you have the right kind of measures in place, things don't. So the way in which I would go is that the right kind of measures, the right kind of changes that need to happen in the kind of institutions as humans we have built is necessary to drive that kind of a change. It's kind of, I really do not know whether something like GDP, does it measure the growth or does it measure the progress? Growth and progress are very different.
Yeah.
That's, I would end there.
Great. Who would like to go next? Pamela, Megan, Pallavi? Anybody could come in.
Sure. So the interesting part from my perspective is being a university student again. So the University of Toronto is, it's rated as one of the most sustainable universities in the world. And the thing that gives me a lot of encouragement is that one of the main parts of their sustainability master plan is to include sustainability curriculum across all of the departments of the university. So whether you're in the Department of Geography, of course, you're going to be getting sustainability education, but even those who are in computer science are learning about the sustainability behind cloud computing. If you're in economics, you're learning about the externalities of mass production. So the people that are coming out of universities now, they really do have a much broader understanding of sustainability and how that can apply in all different kinds of work environments. So that's really encouraging because we are, just like what Santhosh was saying, they're going to start seeing it through a different lens. We are constantly criticizing GDP as the measure of success and growth for a country. They're going to be looking at it differently. They're going to be considering the harms that we are doing through growth. So from that perspective, it's quite encouraging to see how things are changing right now. And I think the challenge for leaders today is, just like what you were saying, Pooja, that there isn't this measurable return on investment that we perceive today. So like I was saying, this is about to change with these people who are coming up. But it's also this upfront cost for what really can be long-term benefits, which is always a difficult position for any leader to be put in, to put how much money into something that you're not going to see the rewards for quite a bit down the road. So I think a lot of it comes from just that we don't have that much experience in this yet. So again, just encouraging to see how this is being spread and diversified across all different fields.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's great to see that universities are spending a lot of time to train the youngsters and the new leaders of tomorrow to think about sustainability. So that's great. That's a great point. What about you, Pallavi? What do you think? How can organizations measure the impact of sustainability efforts?
Yeah, I think like building on Santhosh and Pamela's points, and going back to the point on leaders, right? I think measuring GDP sort of was important maybe like 60 70 years ago, but now it's redundant. It's not that important anymore. I think there have been conversations about measuring happiness, like gross happiness index. Some countries are measuring that, but at the same time, like how do you really define what should be measured as for human beings to sort of live in thriving and sustainable societies? So I think a lot needs to be done so that these measures could be institutionalized. It's great that it's already being taught in multiple places, but at the same time, I think it's the policy leaders and the state actors, state heads, um, all the country heads that need to sort of really be cognizant about now, do we show off our GDP numbers or do we actually do some work in sustainability, because that is the need of the hour. Like honestly, when you spoke about the person who was saying that it's return on investment and all of that, and I studied some economics in my public policy course, and that was the first time. As an engineer, I had like very little exposure to economics. But when I studied that, and I was very surprised that why are we not thinking about unintended consequences while talking about profit maximization? Why are we not thinking about overexploitation of resources? The resources are limited. So I just felt like there was a fundamental sort of disconnect here. Like we think that the resources are infinite and you can overexploit, right? Like that is profit maximization, but you don't understand that the resources are limited. So I feel like whoever sort of is going ahead, still going ahead with this kind of model in mind and this kind of a theory is quite outdated. You need to now think about what is needed. The climate change is real. Adverse weather events have been increasing, and it's slowly coming closer to us, right? Like even the most privileged ones. Now is the time to actually change the narrative and change the measures. So whoever is still coming up with, I feel like, of course, like I feel angry, and then like
Of
but
course.
then I feel like there is naivety in that thought, and it
Yes.
needs to change.
Great. And that's a great point that you've
Pooja,
put together.
I
Yes.
wanted to come in and before Megan comes in. In terms of we looking at the things also, is like, for example, SDGs. We all know it as 2015, it came in and we have wonderful measurements. There is a ranking which happens every year, and almost everyone will know that Finland is number one in terms of
Yes.
rank. And the day before yesterday, the India ranks came out, and Kerala, from where I'm speaking now, is number one. But one thing we do not know is that after 4 years after SDG was published, we started monitoring what is called as a spillover ranking.
Hmm.
Because if you really look at the spillover ranking of Finland, it is, I think, 136 or 139,
Oh,
which
okay.
means that whatever you are consuming, because of that, somebody else is not achieving SDG. So if these kind of things are not talked about, these kind of things does not hit media. So like, for example, my own state, it's a consumption state. We don't produce anything. I mean, literally we might be number one in terms of SDG. We are making progress inside, but then the way in which we are consuming, we are not allowing somebody else to reach their SDGs. So I think some of these kind of things, we bind our periphery and say that everything looks good, but it's not.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Absolutely. You're bang on and on that point. Megan, what do you think?
Now, I think this topic of understanding how to measure impact is something, it's a difficult topic to understand because what is impact? I think we're still trying to understand what impact actually is and how we measure it. And it's vastly different depending on the company and the organization that you work for. So I'm constantly thinking about how to measure my impact as an individual, as an entrepreneur, and micro business a bit better every single day. One thing that I've been working on for myself as a micro business, as a company, and understanding what my impact is, just to give you an example, is kind of from a holistic side. We can just think about what is all the impact and the different micro topics that a company could go over, for example, in scope 1, 2, or 3. But for example, in my company, that's a digital company, and that has very little impact on a scope 1 and scope 2 level, if any. All my emissions and the impact that I can make is really in the scope 3. So better understanding what type of impact I can have as a micro business in the world is, on one level, mitigating my scope 3 emissions. I first have to understand that and categorize it so that I then can actually do something about it. That's the first step. And then how do I do that when scope 3 is still rather a little bit complicated, even for micro businesses? So the complexity is definitely there. But then also understanding impact from more of like a societal and like a different level that's not tangible. So for example, as a marketing has an impact. My agency has an impact on how we encourage people to buy certain things, for example, or how we change world views, or how we influence consumption and buying habits.
Mhm.
How do you measure that?
Yeah.
That's all kind of in the next scope, and they're even calling it a whole new scope and a whole new layer of complexity there. But measuring impact, I think, is first you have to understand what are the big problems that you need to face and what can you face individually as a business and where you can have the biggest impact. That's a journey, and that takes time of reflection and also understanding the data. And then from there, you can work on it little bit by little bit.
Yeah, interesting. Let's take some of the comments. So somebody is saying that sustainability messaging isn't just about raising awareness, it's about driving real action. Absolutely. And so there's a question which says, how can brands balance authenticity and engagement in sustainability messaging without overwhelming their audience? Who would like to take up that question?
Yeah, I could take it. I actually know. Hi, God. She's in my LinkedIn network. I'm happy to have her here asking this question.
Great.
So authenticity and not overwhelming your audience. I think overwhelm, especially at this moment in time, is something for us definitely to be aware of. If we just take what we're doing out of the ecosystem, you have everything on the political level and the negativity and just the increasing noise of social media and the vast amount of information that we are given every day. So I think as a sustainable communicator, you have to be aware of your current climate and feelings of your audience, and where are the pieces that you can have the most impact in moving them and nudging them in the right direction. This takes a deep and empathetic understanding of your audience on where they are in their journey. And then on the authenticity side, if you can understand and have this empathy level of who they are and how you can help them, being authentic about how you can approach those problems, not more, for example, as a top down, but as like a community and a transformation narrative of how you're working together to mass this change, I think is really kind of the authenticity and the kind of the sustainable message that we need at the moment because of all this overwhelm, this kind of feeling of community togetherness, that we can come together and work on this together. We're stronger together. We can lean in with each other and work towards our sustainable goals. I think these are very important and authentic messages that just make sense for the current world that we're in.
Absolutely. Since
Maybe I
we've
can
been
add a couple of things.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah. So from a clear, authentic communications, there are two things I would kind of mention. One is the context of what you're communicating is very important, because just putting some numbers out there and explaining how you improved. For example, if I have improved my water consumption by 5% when the overall stress in the area has increased by 20%, doesn't make any sense, right? So the context is very important. The second part is also comparability, in the sense, and then that goes to the thing as to whom you are communicating with, because you need to know the audience. Sometime back, people went about saying, one report and all those things. One report cannot satisfy all stakeholders. They wouldn't understand. You cannot have one language for all the stakeholders. So I think you need to understand your audience, what you're really communicating, and then bring in that context orientation with comparable kind of information. That would be my message.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think just like our fingers are different, every person is different, and so are the thought processes. So, yeah, bullseye, Santhosh, on that. There's another question which says, could it be that the difficulty in quantifying resources with a monetary value is causing the disconnect between profit maximization and achieving sustainable growth? Would anybody, Pallavi, would you like to take that up? Or Pamela?
Yeah, I guess it's definitely difficult to sort of quantify, impact. When I moved from management consulting to public health, I realized that, there I was working on bar charts where you can calculate profit maximization, but then Like we were working in public health, and there were bar charts on number of lives saved, but that was over like many years, and it was so difficult to measure. So it's definitely more challenging and like complex to measure impact. But at the same time, it's not impossible, right? Like, so there are many systems in place, there are many measurements in place. It's also about like, what do we give importance to? If we continue to give importance to profit maximization, we'll continue to chase it. But if
Yes.
we give importance to other aspects, growth, sustainability, then we will have measures to also like implement and figure out what's happening in that area. So again, I'll go back to my first comment, which was on what are the global leaders making it a priority. If it still is profit maximization, then yeah, we'll continue to measure that.
Absolutely. And I think given that we are talking about challenges, maybe you can all talk about if technology has played any role in, supporting or making it worse, these challenges. So anybody can step in and talk about how technology is playing a role.
If I may just continue on that, because I talked about the tech leaders, right? Like, so I guess in a way, right now we are living in an age where there's so much information with everybody, like, with the invention of the smartphones, we have the world in our hands. And there is no really checks and balances or regulation in terms of who is consuming what information. We are seeing rising, mental health disorders in teenagers. And there is like research and links established on that, right? So technology is definitely sort of an enabler in the sense that it's exposing us to all of this world out there. But at the same time, because there aren't checks and balances and the governments couldn't put that in place, the tech companies like expanded globally without any regulations in place, and government is only now catching up, especially the US government, right? So um, and like the point I wanted to make was, technology unfortunately sort of has created this narrative where we are living in our own bubbles. We have to regulate what content we are consuming because nobody else is doing that.
True.
And that is sort of, as you said, every person is different, they behave differently, they make different decisions. We are making decisions based on the bubble we live in. And we think that that is the worldview and that is the right thing, and we have to consciously make that effort to get out of that bubble. So I think like my recommendation, my suggestion is, please get out of your bubbles. Talk to people who have opposing point of view and understand that there are some hard truths that are out there. Listen to the scientists, it's happening already. Don't be in your bubble and think that all of this is a hoax or something.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, we will talk about how collaborations can actually help in a while. But before that, any other thoughts from Megan, Pamela, Santhosh?
Pooja, there is a big problem in that question. The question is, the moment you make it fungible into a single monetary value, the impacts, people will start making the different impacts fungible, and which is atypical of business, right? I mean, for example, safety can go down while my carbon sequestration go up,
Yeah.
because everything is fungible to one thing, and so that's kind of a big challenge. The moment you bring in, you can quantify it into monetary values, but the moment you do it in monetary values, people will start using different kind of impacts fungible across, which is not good again.
Right. Absolutely. You're right. What do you think, Megan, Pamela?
Go ahead, Pamela.
Yeah, so I was thinking in ecology, especially, we have started actually putting dollar values on some of these ecosystem services. So, for example, the amount of air filtration that urban trees will provide, how much would it cost to do that with technology? So this is starting now where we are quantifying the value of nature and those services. And I think that it is starting to be used in kind of this the accounting balance, and it is starting to be considered much more now.
Correct. Megan.
Yeah, just a couple points. I think the point of information overwhelm and misinformation is a really big thing right now, especially in the space of climate communication, especially as we have some pretty negative political forces coming out and just saying incorrect information that is not science-based. There's a couple things I could probably say on this. I think from one level, as marketers and communicators, someone like me, business leaders who are very invested in this space, I think you need to save your energy in a way, save your energy for the people who are willing to listen, and think about how you argue and present your argument to people who have been, I don't know, discouraged so much from the misinformation and the negativity. Again, we're kind of going back to what has already been said, understanding who you're talking to, understanding who those people are so that you can have a more engaging conversation with them. I think that's going to be very important for better communicating through the negativity and the complexity of what's going on right now. When it comes to misinformation, I think marketers, communicators, sustainable business people like us have to be very careful not to spend all our energy in the next 4 years, let's say, or more, just rebuttaling everything that's gone, or we will see no progress. I mean, seriously. I completely get it. We get defensive, right? Because we understand the science. And I get that way too. So I completely understand. But if we spend all our time doing that, we're never going to make process. So it always has to keep a balance, understanding and presenting the information in a constructive way back to them, basically fighting the misinformation, pushing the agenda forward with the people who are already sold on the key, and enabling them and giving them the tools through climate communication, for example, to get there. So it needs to be a balance from my perspective.
Yes, absolutely. And I think all of you have been pointing towards the direction of, collaboration and how it's important to connect with people from different sectors, understanding them, understanding different areas, understanding people from using different platforms, etc. So what role can you give us some example, just one example each, of how collaboration has helped you in your respective careers in making, sustainability efforts? Anybody can start. Pamela?
Sure.
I can go ahead.
Sure. So I've done a lot of work with grassroots environmental organizations. And the thing that's really great about that is that we get to meet people exactly where they are, and we get to meet people doing something that they enjoy doing. So one of the organizations that I worked for, they create habitat gardens in a large city in Canada. And so in climate speak, what they're doing is urban greening. We are building resilience for local insects. This is all focused on pollinator science. We're creating more permeable land cover because we're getting a lot more urban flooding with extreme storms. We're reducing edge habitats, et cetera, et cetera. But what we found is that people are getting involved in this organization, not because of all of those things, but because they want more butterflies in their gardens. So in they come, and we get to introduce them to this idea of habitat gardening and doing something for the climate. And these people we're not climate.
Yeah. Pamela, we can't hear you. I think we lost you in between. Yeah, sorry.
I can jump in on that because I loved what Pamela was saying. Because these people connected with the topic, which is wonderful and beautiful, and they came to it because they love butterflies, not necessarily because they were engaged with the climate topic and they saw the relevance to that. So I think it's just a great reminder in general on how what Pamela was saying, that meeting people where they are at and how impactful your topics and your projects can be by kind of almost also not assuming that the climate topic is the most important thing to them. They care more about the things in their communities, their families, the things that are interconnected within their lives, focus on these type of things, and then from there, connecting it somehow to the climate topic. So that's what I was thinking as Pamela was talking. I thought it was very impactful.
Okay, great. What do you think, Santhosh?
So from my example, I would say is that from my earlier consulting days, we could really structure some good finances in the sense that, bringing in multilaterals, philanthropists, as well as the private sector all together into one particular project and structure the whole of the finances around, because that's something which is important. Because going forward, the whole momentum around sustainability and the pace at which we have to move, finance has to move in that direction.
Yes.
So I think some of the directions which we can even look at collaboration is in terms of structuring some very innovative financing structures so that we bring to the multiple stakeholders.
Great. What do you think, Pallavi?
Yeah, I think I would give the example of the work we are doing right now at Climate Asia, where we are running accelerator programs for grassroots non-profit organizations who are working in climate adaptation and gender equity. So a lot of like people on the ground are we are sort of acting as ecosystem enablers, where we are connecting people on the ground with sort of people at national level, international level. We're trying that a lot of funding flows into these organizations because, in general, they don't have the capacity to be fundraising at a level uh, or having a communications, strategy or personnel in place to be able to like have the connects that can ensure their sustainability and can ensure that they scale up. So we are sort of we have a mandate of raising about $10 million for these 50 grassroots nonprofit organizations, and we hope that sort of that amount of money and the capacity building that we'll provide through the accelerator program would really help us sort of build these organizations. And the aim is to promote locally led adaptation. I think we've tried top down approaches, but it's time that we sort of empower more and more locally led adaptation on the ground and let the traditional indigenous methods sort of survive and thrive, because I feel like that's what's going to really help us in the long run to sort of mitigate the climate disasters.
Great. Yes. I must say that, this discussion has been completely insightful. Do you guys have any other thoughts, any other points that you'd like to share? Because I think we've spoken about challenges, we've spoken about strategies, we've spoken about leaders, partnerships, and what are the things that you can, give as takeaways. Any other points that come to your mind that, you think we might have missed?
Just one more thing I wanted to say, building on Mega's point, was the rebuttal on social media. I mean, you're not going to solve the climate crisis by putting posts on social media. There is need for action. There is a lot of eco fatigue and grief, but to get over it, there is a need for action, and action not on social media, but action on the ground. So
Yes.
go out, interact with the change makers on the ground, help them in any way that you can. Don't just fight battles on, all the many different platforms that are now sprouting up.
Absolutely. And climate change
So
is no longer a distant threat. I think it's here and we need to address it. Businesses need to address it through innovation, technology. Policy leaders should come in, collaboration should happen. So, yes, absolutely, Pallavi, you're bang on. There's another question. The panel is focused on climate change. Are there any aspects of sustainability that are not directly tied to climate change? So yes, I think Santosh, you had touched upon it in the beginning. Remember, I think maybe the conversation delved too much into environment, climate, but maybe not really into the other aspects that you were mentioning in the beginning. So would you like to address this question first, and maybe the other people can then step in?
No, of course, as per the definition, the way in which we have kind of defined sustainability, it involves many things. But as usual, what happens is that the moment these days when we start discussing sustainability, there is this tunnel we get into, which is climate change, which
Yes.
we also did. We got into that tunnel. So, but yeah, I mean, it's one of the most pressing topics that we look into. But things can be different in various places, and I keep repeating that. For example, in India, one of the biggest challenges which we are facing is around water and health of the people, and there are a lot of challenges around, and we definitely can kind of look at it. But just to kind of top up what Pallavi said earlier is that today whatever is happening around you, especially for sustainability professionals, there is enough to depress you. But I would say that I remember that story where the boy keeps throwing the starfish one by one to the sea and saying that I made a difference to that one, right? So keep doing whatever you are doing.
Yes, absolutely. Any other thoughts around sustainability, partnerships?
I'll comment on this question from the community. I really like it because I think from a climate communicator, it's a great question because it makes us think about what's the disconnection between us always talking about climate change and this terrible threat and sustainability. And I think it's because the way that we've been communicating and talking a lot over the last 30 or plus years is climate change. And that climate change is this system of doing business unsustainably, right? So we're talking about the negativity and the effects of our human-led activities that is leading to climate change. Well, why don't we step backwards and we more look about, okay, the reason why we're having these effects is because the way that we've been doing business is not sustainable. And if we look at it that way, well, then there's just a huge amount of wonderful and exciting opportunities of this world, this business world that we can create together that's going to be people, planet, profit driven. And that could be balanced and benefiting people of all different backgrounds, but also looking at nature and looking at future generation, all the things that we need to look at. So I love this question because I think it opens up another conversation of how climate communication isn't necessarily hitting the mark, because we've just been throwing out this word called climate change, but not really talking more about the transformation that we're really trying to work towards as a society, as humanity, and how like exciting this is for us to be, pioneering and championing as business leaders.
Absolutely. That is what. So action matters, and true sustainability goes beyond corporate branding and communication. Yes, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and special thanks to all our panelists here who've shared their expertise in the area of sustainability and how they balance it and how they share it with the businesses. Let's continue these conversations and take meaningful action. That is what was the end message that everyone gave. Have a great day. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for joining Digital Dialogue. Look for more episodes at noon Eastern Time on most Tuesdays of every month. Can't join the live session? You can watch the replay anytime on our YouTube channel.